Galileo Galilei was born in Pisa, which was then part of the Duchy of Florence, on the 15th of February 1564. He was the first of 6 children of Vincenzo Galilei, a famous lutenist, composer, and music theorist. Galileo became an accomplished lutenist himself. When Galileo was 8, his family moved to Florence. He then was educated in the Camaldolese monastery at Vallombrosa. Although Galileo seriously considered the priesthood as a young man, at his father's urging, he instead enrolled at the University of Pisa for a medical degree. Up to this point, Galileo had deliberately been kept away from mathematics, since a physician earned a higher income than a mathematician. However, after accidentally attending a lecture on geometry, he talked his reluctant father into letting him study mathematics and natural philosophy instead of medicine. He created the thermoscope, a forerunner of the thermometer, and in 1586 published a small book on the design of hydrostatic balance he invented. In 1589, he was appointed to the chair of mathematics in Pisa. In 1592, he moved to the University of Padua, where he taught geometry, mechanics, and astronomy until 1610. During this period, Galileo made significant discoveries in both pure fundamental science as well as practical applied science. In 1609, Galileo was among the first to use a refracting telescope as an instrument to observe stars, planets, or moons. On the 7th of January 1610, Galileo observed with his telescope what he described at the time as 3 fixed stars, totally invisible by their smallness, as close to Jupiter and lying on a straight line through it. Observations on subsequent nights showed that the position of these stars relative to Jupiter were changing in a way that would have been inexplicable if they had not really been fixed stars. On the 10th of January, Galileo noted that one of them had disappeared, an observation which he attributed to its being hidden behind Jupiter. Within a few days, he concluded that they were orbiting Jupiter. He had in fact discovered 3 of Jupiter's 4 largest satellites. He discovered the 4th on the 13th of January. Galileo named the group the Medicean stars, in honor of the Grand Duke of Tuscany. Later astronomers, however, renamed them Galilean satellites in honor of their discoverer. These satellites are now known as Io, Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto. His observations of the satellites of Jupiter caused a revolution in astronomy. A planet with a smaller planet orbiting it did not confirm the principles of Aristotelian cosmology, which held that all heavenly bodies circle the Earth. And many astronomers and philosophers initially refused to believe that Galileo could have observed such a thing. Galileo made a number of contributions to what is now known as engineering. Between 1595 and 1598, Galileo devised and improved a geometric and military compass suitable for the use of gunners and surveyors. In about 1593, Galileo constructed a thermometer using the expansion and contraction of air in a bulb to move water in an attached tube. Prior to Galileo's construction of his version of a telescope, Thomas Harriot, an English mathematician and explorer, had already used what he dubbed a perspective tube to observe the moon. Reporting his observations, Harriot noted only strange spottedness in the waning of the crescent, but was ignorant to the cause. Galileo had understood the patterns of light and shadow were in fact topographical markers. While not being the only one to observe the moon through a telescope, Galileo was the first to deduce the cause of the uneven waning as light occlusion from the lunar mountains and craters. In his study, he also made topographical charts estimating the heights of the mountains. By 1615, Galileo's writings on heliocentrism had been submitted to the Roman Inquisition. Galileo went to Rome to defend himself. February of 1616, an inquisitional commission declared heliocentrism to be foolish and absurd in philosophy and formally heretical, since it explicitly contradicts in many places the sense of the Holy Scripture. Pope Paul V instructed Cardinal Bellarmine to order Galileo to abandon the opinion that heliocentrism was physically true. For the next decade, Galileo stayed well away from the controversy. He revived his project of writing a book on the subject, encouraged by the election of Cardinal Maffeo Barberini as Pope Urban VIII in 1623. Barberini was a friend and admirer of Galileo and had opposed the condemnation of Galileo in 1616. Galileo's resulting book, Dialogue Concerning the Two Chief World Systems, was published in 1632, with formal authorization from the Inquisition and papal permission. Galileo had alienated one of his biggest and most powerful supporters, the Pope, and was called to Rome to defend his writings in September of 1632. He finally arrived in February of 1633, however. Throughout his trial, Galileo steadfastly maintained that since 1616, he had faithfully kept his promise not to hold any of the condemned opinions, and initially he denied even defending them. The sentence of the Inquisition was delivered on the 22nd of June. Galileo was found vehemently suspect of heresy. He was sentenced to formal imprisonment at the pleasure of the Inquisition. On the following day, this was commuted to house arrest, which he remained under for the rest of his life. His offending dialogue was banned, and in an action not announced at the trial, publication of any of his works were forbidden, including any he might write in the future. After a period, Galileo was allowed to return to his villa at Arcetri near Florence in 1634, where he spent the remainder of his life under house arrest. It was while Galileo was under house arrest that he dedicated his time to one of his finest works, Two New Sciences. Here he summarized work he had done some 40 years earlier on the two sciences now called kinematics and strength of materials, published in Holland to avoid the censor. His book has received high praise from Albert Einstein. As a result of this work, Galileo is often called the father of modern physics. Galileo went completely blind in 1638, so he was permitted to travel to Florence for medical advice. Galileo continued to receive visitors until 1642, when he died on the 8th of January at the age of 77.